Something people ask me quite often is, what are my thoughts about dress code? And I think there is a critical element about how we dress that will impact our firm. So I'm going to share with you my thoughts on that, which I think will impact the profits of your organization. So something that I have lots of discussions with other practitioners with is, what is the proper dress code for an accounting or a bookkeeping business? And the comments I get back and the ideas I get back from practitioners vary a lot. And I found this seems to be kind of a general consensus, more or less, for practitioners who are out in the country. Well, if I'm out in the country, I'm not about to wear a tie because it'll intimidate my clients. And I often get the same kind of comments from people who are more into the bookkeeping business. Well, I'm not an accountant, I'm a bookkeeper, so therefore I'm not going to be dressing up like an accountant with the tie and all. I'm a big fan of the coat and tie. I think it has an impact on how you're perceived as an accountant. And I don't believe it makes a difference whether your practice is in the city, a big city, small city, a rural city, or way out in the country. I've known some practitioners who were all over the places, who were practicing all over the place, and I always found that the ones who seemed to put a little bit of emphasis on the dress code seemed to have a little bit higher success rate than those who did not seem to have a dress code. So there is, in my opinion, a little bit of a correlation between how you dress. Now, I know I'm going to get tons of comments, and I'm okay with that, with people saying, that's not true, it really doesn't make a difference, people don't care how you dress. And some of you may even defend the more relaxed look, saying, well, the client will feel intimidated if I'm wearing a tie. I never bought into that argument that clients will feel intimidated. They will not be intimidated by the coat and tie. They may be intimidated by you and the way you speak and all of that. But I'd be willing to bet that you could put all my clients out in a row and ask them whether or not my coat and tie intimidated them, and they would say not a chance. Because what they saw is way beyond the coat and tie. They saw someone who took the time to listen to them, who cared about them, and who was able to provide good professional information. And the coat and tie, all that did was put a nice bow on the gift and make it a little bit better. And I'm still somewhat convinced that if you put an invoice in front of someone for a certain amount that's fairly high, they're going to expect a higher amount and expect to pay it if you're wearing a tie than if you're not. And I am quite certain about that. The other thing that I believe the dress code will do is change the behavior of your team. I am quite convinced that if your team is all wearing a tie, they will conduct themselves in a little bit more professionalism than if you let them come in more relaxed. And I'd be willing to bet, try the experiment one day. Try everybody come in with a coat, tie, dressed to the T, and then the following week, tell them they can come in dressed in whatever they want. Pajama pants, sweatpants, shorts, doesn't matter. I am convinced that you're going to see a change in their behavior, in how they operate, how they think, and how they work. And there's tons of studies out there with kids, where they wear uniforms tend to conduct themselves a little bit differently than the schools where the kids don't have a uniform. So I think the same applies with a business. So I say, why not go the extra mile and put the tie on? Now, for the guys who are saying, well, the tie chokes me, so I'm not going to wear one. Well, believe it or not, you'll get used to it. And most of us, as youngsters, we remember putting our first tie on and saying, oh my God, this thing is killing me. We all go through that. But with time, it dissipates. And after a while, they don't even notice that they're wearing a tie. And I've seen that over and over with employees who would come in, and when I told them about the dress code, they would say, oh, do I really need to wear a tie? Because it really chokes me. And I'm telling them, this is the code for this office. If you want to work here, yes, you wear a tie. And most of the time, they're going to do it a little bit reluctantly. And Lord, 3-4 years later, they're still working here. So obviously, the tie is not a big deal. They will make it sound as if it's a big deal, but it's not. If they like the job, they like the environment, they like the experience, it's not the tie that's going to drive your team away from yourself. Now notice that I talk a lot about men's dress code. Women is a little bit more complicated because they can get away with a different dress code and still look very professional.
You have no style or sense of fashion.
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
So a man wearing a t-shirt will not cut it. But a lady could wear a t-shirt with a nice jacket on top of it with the proper jewelry, and that person will look like $1 million and be able to really pass as a professional with a professional look. So it's very different in the dress code for a man and a woman. So that's simpler with men. Jacket, dress shirt, tie, you're just about set.
Nothing suits me like a suit.
But on that note, even at that, make sure your dress shirt is pressed and not full of wrinkles. Same thing with your coat, and your tie is not too worn out. So keep that in mind. And again, going back to the women, just look yourself in the mirror and then ask yourself, does that person that's looking back at me look like a bookkeeper or an accountant who should and could be charging a very high hourly rate? And if the answer is yes, then you've got yourself a good dress code. And if you're having doubts, then maybe it's time you go back into your closet and find something else to wear. So, there's not a whole lot to say here. I just thought it would be worthwhile me setting my thoughts out as to what I think is important with regards to the way you dress. And I think, to some degree, it gives an impression. And for a lot of clients, it's their first impression. So why not put your best foot forward? Why not always dress the best you can? And let's face it, yes, there will be an extra cost in your wardrobe for having nice clothes, but the difference at the end of 20 years won't be that much. And I suspect that it will be greatly offset by the extra revenues you're going to be able to generate by having dressed the part. So before I continue, I would really appreciate you guys taking just a second to like this video and subscribe. That would be really, really nice. And of course, provide your comments. And if you found this to be of any use, please share this video with anybody that you think might appreciate it. Now, one of the things that I also would have you consider is, especially for those of you who are working from your basement, and maybe even more so for, well, I consider as lone wolves, the people who are working alone and working from home. Now, imagine now going into somebody else's home to meet with them on a business aspect. Now, imagine the person sitting across from you having a really nice suit and tie. How much do you feel that you are infringing on their personal life? Probably not too much, because of the fact they are dressed in a professional attire. If, however, when you meet with that person in their house, they are dressed very casually, I suspect that they will feel a little less at ease in dealing with you, because they will feel as if they are now infringing into your personal life, that they are intruding into your personal living area. And so I think a dress code is probably even more important for those of you who are working from home, so that people get a sense that, okay, I get it. He's at work today, and therefore when I'm coming into his home, I'm not really coming into his home, I'm really coming into an office environment. And I suspect that the dress code will put them even more at ease. And even more so if everybody on your team is dressed the same way. Then they get a sense, well, obviously nobody here is really living out of this house, they're all really working. So again, give that some thought for those of you who are working from home.